In a world where dreams can be bought with a ticket, the lottery stands as the ultimate game of chance. But what happens when the dream turns into a nightmare? From a suburban family in Canada to a teenager in Britain and a shelf stalker in Texas, we'll uncover the dark side of lottery wins that the bright lights don't show. These are not just stories of riches to rags, they're tales of how sudden wealth can expose the fragile aspects of human nature. Join us as we uncover the hidden side of lottery wins, where the shine of new fortunes often masks the shadows they cast. Case 1. E.B. Ronchioli. Imagine your luckiest day turning into your worst nightmare. This isn't just a story of fortune, but rather a chilling tale of how a $5 million lottery win, meant to be a dream come true, turned into a dark saga of deceit, betrayal, and ultimately death. E.B. Ronchioli could hardly believe her luck when she discovered she was the winner of a $5 million lottery jackpot near Ontario, Canada. In 1991, E.B. Ronchioli and her friend Ludmila Hiotin hit the jackpot in the Canada Lotto 649, winning a massive $10 million. They divided the winnings equally, with E.B. receiving the life-changing sum of $5 million. She was a wife and mother, known for her love of bingo nights and her kind, generous spirit. Her life before the win was quiet, filled with the day-to-day joys and struggles of a suburban family. As the reality of her new fortune sank in, E.B.'s excitement was truly visible. She imagined all the ways her life would change. With plans to secure her family's future, she envisioned lavish trips to Europe, donating to charities she held dear, and reinvesting in her community. Her dreams were as grand as her winnings, including the possibility of setting up a trust fund for her grandchildren, and perhaps even buying a new family home. The news of her windfall spread quickly, and E.B. became a local celebrity, and her story became a beacon of hope to her neighbors and a testament to the life-changing power of luck. E.B. Ronchioli's husband, Dr. Joseph Ronchioli, appeared to lead a comfortable life together. Joseph, a successful gynecologist who was responsible for earning the main income of their household, and E.B., a homemaker with a zest for life, had been married for 3 decades, navigating through life's ups and downs together. However, beneath the surface of their union, cracks began to show, particularly after E.B.'s lottery. Joseph's discovery that E.B. had spent much of her winnings in secret, even on a son he had never known about, sparked a silent storm of tension and jealousy. Their home, which was once a shared space, turned into a divided house where they lived separate lives. E.B.'s struggle with addiction and alcoholism only deepened the divide, revealing a harsher side that was hidden from public view. Lifestyle changes after the win were not what one would expect. Instead of living in luxury, their net worth dwindled, with E.B.'s fortune mysteriously vanishing and Joseph's income not enough to maintain their once affluent status. Friends and neighbors began to notice the shift in the couple's dynamic, the disintegration of their happiness, and the alarming behaviors that pointed to something sinister brewing beneath the surface of their marriage. 5 years after the fateful lottery win that promised E.B. Ronchioli and her husband, Dr. Joseph Ronchioli, a life of ease and luxury, the dream had shattered, leaving behind a trail of secrets, regret, and a mystery that would only be solved with a tragic revelation. The couple, who once shared a home in the affluent city of Vaughan, found their marriage crumbling under the weight of financial secrecy and personal struggles. E.B., who had kept the majority of her lottery winnings to herself, had become increasingly secretive about her expenditures, which included substantial sums given to her children, one of which was unknown to Joseph. As the money flowed out in undisclosed channels, their relationship frayed, leading to a life of almost complete separation within their own home. Joseph, a gynecologist by profession, watched his wife's health decline. E.B.'s energy waned, her personality changed with her growing dependence on alcohol, and her health seemed to deteriorate rapidly. Mysterious symptoms that couldn't be easily explained began to manifest, yet her aversion to seeking medical help left Joseph in a difficult position. In July 2003, the story took a turn for the worse, when E.B. was found completely lifeless on their couch. Initial assumptions pointed to natural causes, but the truth was far more sinister. Later, the autopsy revealed a lethal combination of painkillers and alcohol in her system. Additionally, they found mysterious needle marks on her arms, which raised alarm bells about the circumstances of her death. When questioned, Joseph's confession about injecting his wife with painkillers sent shockwaves through their community. He claimed that it was an attempt to help Evie with her ailments due to her distrust of doctors. She had been afraid of physicians and would refuse to get checked by them, which is why he had stepped in. However, his failure to call emergency services or to act when she was found unresponsive seemed to be very doubtful. Despite his wife's fears and as a doctor himself, he should have known that an emergency situation would have required professional assistance. The subsequent investigation then exposed the layers of their private life, shedding light on a near-bankrupt estate despite their apparent wealth, and a deep-set unhappiness. The trial court showcased the full extent of their private sufferings and the disintegration of their marriage, shocking all those who knew them. Joseph was convicted of manslaughter, with the jury taking days to sift through the complex web of financial ruin, family secrets, and medical intervention gone wrong. In the end, a judge sentenced the 72-year-old to 7 years of prison, declaring the act intentional, marking a grave end to what was once a story of spectacular luck. The stark difference between the Rocchioli's outward appearance of happiness and their internal chaos highlighted a dark warning. That secrets can have dire consequences, and trust, once broken, can lead to disastrous downfall. The trial of Dr. Joseph Rocchioli for the death of his wife Evie was a poignant drama that gripped the Vaughan community and made headlines across Canada. In the courtroom, the prosecution presented a case that Joseph's injection of painkillers into Evie was a deliberate act, which stemmed from his outrage over the financial ruin she'd brought upon them. Her secretive spending of the lottery fortune and the hidden people she spent it on fueled the fire in the relationship, leading to such an outcome. The defense countered these claims, arguing that Joseph was merely trying to aid his wife, who was suffering from poor health and a fear of doctors. The verdict sent shockwaves through their family and community. For friends and neighbors, the trial laid open details to the private agony behind the Rocchioli's public facade of success and happiness. It left the community questioning how well they truly knew the people they lived among, and whether the outward signs of riches and luxury could mask a darker reality. Legally, the case set a precedent for how financial deception within a marriage could escalate to tragic outcomes. It raised awareness about the potential dangers of untreated addiction and mental health issues, and highlighted the importance of financial transparency between spouses. For the locals around, the case of the couple became a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of sudden wealth and the vulnerabilities it could expose. It served as a grim reminder that money, often seen as a solution to life's problems, can also become a catalyst for downfall when coupled with underlying personal issues. The Rocchioli story remains a tragic narrative of how a dream turned into a nightmare, leading to discussions on the responsibilities that come with handling a windfall and the complexities of human relationships when they're strained by secrets and lies. Case 2. Callie Rogers. Next up, we have the story of Callie Rogers. At the tender age of 16, Callie became Britain's youngest lottery winner. Her life transformed in an instant with a staggering win of $2.3 million. This fortune, however, would soon spiral into a cautionary tale, echoing the age-old adage, more money, more problems. The year was 2003, a time when most teenagers are struggling with school exams and adolescent dilemmas. For Callie, these typical teenage concerns were abruptly replaced by the overwhelming responsibility of managing a fortune. With the naivety of youth and the excitement of newfound wealth, she embarked on a spending spree that seemed to know no bounds. Callie spent carelessly on the luxuries that were once the stuff of dreams: drugs, plastic surgery, high-end clothing, and endless parties. Approximately $300,000 vanished into the clutches of cocaine addiction, a glaring testament to the unpreparedness of a young soul thrust into the world of affluence. Callie's story took darker turns with each passing day. The glittering world of wealth and parties soon revealed its ugly underbelly: addiction and recklessness. Her life, which had once seemed like a fairy tale, became marred by the harsh consequences of her choices. The drugs that once provided an escape began to chain her in a cycle of dependence, leading her further away from the life she had once envisioned. The descent into chaos was rapid. In a harrowing incident, Callie found herself in a high-speed police chase, an episode resulting in a car crash that starkly symbolized the crash of her once dreamlike life. The young woman, who had held the world in her hands, was now struggling with the severity of her actions, her life deviating dangerously off course. This crash was not just physical, but also metaphorical, marking a turning point in her chaotic journey. It was a wake-up call, highlighting the destructive path she was on, fueled by a lifestyle that her lottery win had made possible. The repercussions of this incident were far-reaching, impacting not only her physical health, but also her mental state and public image. Once seen as a fortunate winner, Callie was now perceived as a cautionary tale of wasted potential and uncontrolled excess. This incident marked the beginning of a long, hard road towards reckoning and recovery, as Callie struggled to find her footing in a life that had spun out of control. Fast forward to 2021, and the picture of Callie Rogers is a huge contrast to the young lottery winner of 2003. Penniless and living on government benefits, she stands as a living embodiment of a dream turned nightmare. The whirlwind of wealth had not just dissipated, it had left in its wake a trail of regret and life lessons learned the hard way. At the age of 33, Callie's story is no longer one of a lucky lottery winner, but of a survivor of the perils that unchecked wealth can bring. Callie Rogers' journey is a harsh reminder of the vulnerabilities of youth, especially when confronted with the immense pressures and temptations that come with sudden wealth. Her story is not just about the mismanagement of money, but also about the lack of guidance and support that is crucial for young individuals in such extraordinary circumstances. It underscores the importance of financial literacy, particularly for those who find themselves in possession of wealth beyond their wildest dreams. Moreover, Callie's plight serves as a sobering illustration of the need for emotional and mental support for lottery winners, especially those who are young and inexperienced. The intoxicating allure of quick and immense wealth can often blindside individuals to the realities of financial responsibility and the psychological impact of such a drastic change in life. Case 3. Billy Bob Harrell Jr. In the history of lottery tragedies, the story of Billy Bob Harrell Jr. stands as a grim reminder of the fleeting nature of fortune and the profound impact of sudden wealth on personal relationships and mental health. This tale begins with an event that many dream of but few experience: winning a colossal lottery jackpot. Billy Bob Harrell Jr., a shelf stocker at Home Depot, found his world transformed overnight when he won $31 million in the Lotto Texas jackpot. The initial days following his win were like a euphoric dream. With the generosity of a man who had known the struggles of life, Billy Bob went on a lavish spending spree. He purchased houses and cars for himself and his family, embracing the role of a benevolent patriarch. His deep religious beliefs guided him to share his fortune with his church, donating substantial amounts and assisting individual members of his congregation. This period was marked by an outpouring of joy and benevolence, a seemingly endless celebration of his good fortune. However, as the saying goes, easy come, easy go. The river of wealth that had seemed so endless began to dry up. The consequences of his unchecked spending soon became apparent. Financial depletion was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, the foundations of his personal life were crumbling. Billy Bob's marriage, once a pillar of his life, began to falter under the strain of his new financial status. The influx of wealth, rather than bringing happiness and security, introduced complexities and challenges that the Harrell family was ill-prepared to handle. The emotional toll of this shift in fortune was massive. Billy Bob, who had envisioned the lottery win as a ticket to a life of ease and joy, found himself navigating through a lot of stress, regret, and disillusionment. The man who had once lived a simple life now found himself in a world where money had changed everything, yet solved nothing. His relationships, his sense of self, and his understanding of happiness were all put to the test in this new, harsh reality. The relentless demands and expectations that came with his newfound wealth created a suffocating environment, far removed from the joy he had anticipated. The once clear lines of his identity blurred as he struggled to reconcile his past life with his present reality. The community's perception of him shifted from admiration to scrutiny, adding to his sense of isolation. Friends and family, who he once thought he could trust, began to show different faces, their intentions muddled by the presence of money. In the end, the dream of a carefree life turned into a relentless burden, leaving Billy Bob lost in a maze of his own making. Tragically, less than 2 years after his lottery win, the dream turned into a nightmare. Billy Bob locked himself in a room and ended his life. Case 4. Yarouj Khan. Last up, we have the case of Yarouj Khan. In 2012, the story of Yarouj Khan, a 46-year-old Indian immigrant and successful Chicago businessman, took a tragic turn. Khan, who had moved to Chicago in the late 1980s, established his own dry cleaning business, Style Dry Cleaners, on Devon Avenue. He later expanded with more shops and invested in real estate. After his pilgrimage to Mecca in 2010, Khan vowed to swear off of gambling. However, he couldn't resist and purchased two $30 scratch tickets from a 7-Eleven, which led to him winning a $1 million prize. Khan chose a lump sum for his winnings, receiving $424,449 after taxes. In honor of such a lucky event, he decided to celebrate with his family, including his wife Shabana Ansari and daughter Jasmine from a previous marriage, and they enjoyed a traditional Indian meal at home together. However, hours later, he was found in distress and rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead the next day. Initially, Khan's death was attributed to arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and no autopsy was performed due to the absence of apparent trauma or foul play. But upon the urging of Khan's brother, Imtiaz Khan, the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office re-examined the case. In September, they alerted the Chicago police that cyanide was found in Khan's blood.
This 46-year-old male, Yarouj Khan, died of cyanide toxicity. A lethal level of cyanide was detected in the peripheral blood.
And by December, his death was ruled as a homicide. Cyanide, a rare and potent poison, causes suffocation by blocking the body's ability to circulate oxygen. The investigation deepened with the exhumation of Khan's body in January for further tests, which unfortunately yielded inconclusive results due to advanced decomposition. The case also sparked a complicated family saga. The IRS had previously sought back taxes from Khan's father-in-law, Faridun Ansari. Following Khan's death, a probate court battle ensued between his brother, Imtiaz, and his widow over his estate, as Khan had left no will. Further adding to the drama, Khan's ex-wife and Jasmine's mother, now Maria Jones, re-emerged after many years, seeking to reconnect with her daughter, whom she believed was in India. As of now, the mystery surrounding Yarouj Khan's poisoning remains unsolved, leaving many questions unanswered and highlighting the intricate dynamics of family relationships and financial disputes following a sudden and unexplained death. From E.B. Ronchioli's concealed struggles to Callie Rogers' youthful descent into chaos and Billy Bob Harrell Jr.'s tragic end, each story echoes a universal truth. Wealth is more than just a number in a bank account. These stories are not just about the misfortune of wealth, but also about the human condition, the struggles of managing sudden change, the complexities of relationships, and the fragile nature of our mental well-being. As we reflect on these narratives, ask yourself, if fortune were to knock on your door tomorrow, would you be ready for the challenge it brings, or would it be a ticket to your own tragic tale?
A Kentucky man who won part of the $280 million lottery jackpot has died. He received a lump sum of $27 million after taxes.
In 2001, David Lee Edwards, a convicted armed robber with a substance abuse problem, was so broke he had to borrow money from a friend just to pay his water bill. With the change, he got a pizza and 2 lottery tickets. Little did he know, one of those lottery tickets would change his life forever. Overnight, he was catapulted from a life bouncing in and out of prison to one of extreme luxury, racehorses and fast cars. His story was a real rags-to-riches tale and proved that Powerball can propel winners from poverty to excessive wealth in an instant. Americans spend over $70 billion on Powerball tickets every year, hoping to get as lucky as Edwards. But what's often overlooked is that 70% of those who find fortune through the lottery go broke within the first few years. And Edwards achieved this more spectacularly than most. Early life and struggles. Edwards was born in 1955 and grew up in Ashland, Kentucky in a low-income family. His early life was marked by tragedy. His 3-year-old sister died during open heart surgery the year he was born, and his eldest brother passed away after driving into shallow water at Greenbow Lake. His mother, racked with grief, struggled to cope with the losses and kept their baby clothes hanging in Edwards' closet. In his teens, he turned to marijuana and alcohol as a way to escape his troubles. At 16, he was caught committing a robbery and had his first run-in with the law. In another event, he got into a shootout with state police and had to be tear-gassed before anyone got hurt. They sent him to a reformatory school, one he'd bragged that Charles Manson had attended, but it didn't stick, and he dropped out before graduation. By age 18, he moved on from weed to harder drugs, and his pattern of substance abuse and theft escalated. Then, when he was 26 years old, he attempted an armed robbery of his local gas station for $360 and was sent to prison for 10 years. He was let out on parole a few times and was able to meet someone, marry, and father a daughter named Tiffany. But he violated his parole as many times as he was released and was soon back in prison and divorced. In total, it took him 16 years to serve his 10-year sentence. Finally, behind bars, Edwards started to turn his life around. He got clean and began taking college courses, determined to make a better life for himself. And on his release in 1997, he started working in the building trade. Tragically, though, addiction continued to plague him, and he struggled to maintain a job. At one point, he even found himself homeless and living without his car. But it wasn't all bad. He met and fell in love with Shauna Maddox, a waitress at Fiesta Bravo, and the two got engaged. He also inherited his parents' old $30,000 house, and although he was still broke, at least they had a roof over their heads. Then in 2001, something extraordinary happened that would change everything. The lottery win. Edwards, who'd spent a third of his life in prison, was at this point in dire financial straits and struggling to make ends meet. Things had become so bad that they couldn't even pay their water bill, and their supply was shut off. Feeling embarrassed and desperate, Edwards turned to a friend for help. He borrowed some money to turn the water back on and decided to take Shauna out for pizza and a drink to forget their troubles. On their way to the bar, they stopped at Clark's Pump and Shop, and on a whim, they decided to try their luck and bought $7 worth of Powerball tickets.
I went up there and played that lottery. I was sincere when I asked God to help me because I was desperate. I felt just desperate in my soul, just desperate.
It had been 18 weeks without a winner, and the jackpot had ballooned to $280 million, the third highest on record at the time. That evening, Edwards and Shauna watched in disbelief as their numbers were called out, every single one. Along with 4 other winners that night, Edwards had just become a multi-millionaire. His share was $41 million, which amounted to $27 million after taxes. A hefty deduction, but still enough to set him up for life.
Buy Shauna a very nice engagement ring, which I really couldn't afford before. And
do you have a ring right now?
I have no jewelry.
No jewelry.
Now, all lottery winners are given 2 choices: take the lump sum or accept yearly payouts for a specified amount of time. So, in Edwards' case, he was offered $27 million on the spot, or $2.9 million a year for 25 years. Given his history, yearly payments would be the safer bet, but every financial expert advises taking the lump sum. This is because investing the lump sum will almost always generate more cash than the yearly payments will achieve. In one of his last wise decisions, Edwards sought the advice of a financial advisor, James Gibbs. He devised a financial plan that, if followed, would generate $85,000 in interest per month for the rest of Edwards' life. He also protected a substantial portion of the fortune by investing $16 million of the profits in extremely safe bonds and annuities. With plans in place, Edwards seemed ready to accept his huge ceremonial check. In spite of his past, he seemed grounded and sensible, saying, "I didn't want to accept this money by saying I'm going to get mansions and I'm going to get cars, I'm going to get this and that." He also added, "I would like to accept it with humility. I want this money to last, for me, for my future wife, for my daughter, and for my future generations." With this attitude and such sound investments, what can go wrong? Edwards' lavish lifestyle. Mere moments after accepting his winnings, Edwards reversed course. Too impatient to wait for the cash to hit his accounts, his first move was to negotiate a $200,000 bank loan so he and some friends could make the trip to Las Vegas to celebrate. Within just 5 days, he squandered the full $200,000 and called his new lawyer to wire him more cash. Once the actual winnings arrived, he moved from a $30,000 rundown, unwatered Kentucky home to a 6,000 square foot, $1.6 million mansion in a gated neighborhood in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, complete with tennis courts and a golf course. Then he spent another $1 million buying a fleet of expensive vehicles, including a $200,000 Lamborghini Diablo and a $90,000 Dodge Viper.
R-Series Bentley Rolls-Royce convertible.
And Shauna, you told me you were going to get a car too. Tell me about that.
Well, it's between three, actually.
Okay.
Dodge Viper, a Lamborghini, or a Ferrari. I really haven't decided which one yet.
In fact, he bought so many vehicles that his neighbors objected to the gated community's board of directors. What was their gripe? He accumulated so many that their affluent neighborhood had begun to resemble a car lot. Next, he bought a $600,000 Palm Springs property nearby, an $80,000 gold watch, a $160,000 ring, a $30,000 plasma TV, 3 racing horses, and a collection of 200 imitation medieval swords and armor. Then, to ensure he never had to travel between his estates in California and Florida like a chump on a commercial aircraft, he bought a private Learjet for $1.9 million and hired his own personal pilot. He also attempted some business investments with the best of intentions, but without Gibbs' input. These included 3 racehorses, which he got for a bargain due to 9/11 reducing overseas buying competition, a limo business, and a $4.5 million fiber optics installation business. Within 3 months, Edwards had blown through $3 million. By the end of the first year, he'd squandered $12 million, getting close to half of his fortune. Tiffany. The only pledge he stuck to was regarding his family. His daughter Tiffany, who was 11 by this point, had been living with her mother while Edwards bounced in and out of prison, and he missed her. When he found out he'd won, she was his first phone call. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "Daddy's won the lottery, baby. I'm sending some people to come get you." The young girl freaked out and went running through the house, yelling and screaming. When she arrived to meet him at the hotel, the room was full of gifts, including a teardrop diamond ring. Unfortunately, there was a dark side to Edward's speed in reuniting with his daughter. As Tiffany would later explain, "The reason my dad sent people to get me was because of the security risk. He was known around here by people who knew I was his only daughter. He was worried they would kidnap me for money." Quickly, he paid off his $8,300 in delinquent child support and sent his ex-wife $500,000 for full custody of Tiffany. Her room in his mansion was decorated with angels and included a pink princess canopy bed, computer, and flat-screen TV, and he hired nannies, maids, and a butler to look after her and one of Shauna's children. Once a month, or whenever she felt like it, she'd fly home on the private jet to visit her mother. For her 13th birthday, he rented out the presidential suite at the Ashland Plaza Hotel for a slumber party, and he spoiled her with trips on yachts and to Cinderella's castle in Disneyland. Of course, not all his purchases were smart. He wasted $35,000 on a Hummer golf cart, which she was too young to drive, and enrolled her in a $16,000 a year private school, which she hated. Substance abuse. Regrettably, Edwards' excesses did not stop at cars, planes, diamonds, houses, and private jets. He and Shauna, now his wife, still struggled with addiction. and the cash only made it easier to fall into old habits. Edwards became, once again, absent from Tiffany's life, leaving her care to the nannies, and together, he and Shauna spent $200,000 each a month on illegal substances. Prescription pills and hard drugs were their drug of choice, and Edwards was extremely generous with both Shauna and his friends. Her OxyContin use got so bad that Edwards paid $80,000 for her to spend 60 days at Passages Malibu, an upmarket rehab clinic. The friends were not so lucky. Many of them died of overdoses, and Edwards paid for each of their funerals. Tragically, Shauna's rehab didn't stick, and their relationship became more volatile. Tiffany would later accuse her of stealing Rolexes and cars from Edwards, saying Shauna just started acting crazy. It was drugs, that's all. People keep telling my dad he should get rid of her, but he never could. He told me, near the end, that his one regret was not getting rid of Shauna and looking after himself, but they were hooked on each other, and then they were just hooked on drugs. In 2004, Shauna stabbed Edwards during a drug-fueled rage with a crack pipe, and the Palm Beach police were called to their estate. The following year, the police were called again, and this time, they found large stashes of cocaine, heroin, prescription drugs, crack, and used syringes in the couple's bedroom. Edwards and Shauna both acquired hepatitis from using dirty needles. The downfall to absolute zero. By 2006, the money was gone, but worse than that, Edwards was in debt. His racehorses, one of which he hoped to name Powerball, all turned out to be losers, and his many investments failed because of his lack of business sense and poor judgment. This left him with rising debt, and he was sued by both his creditors and former business partners. His financial advisor, Gibbs, was dumbfounded and told reporters if he followed my investment advice, he'd be pulling in about $85,000 a month for the rest of his life. Instead, he sold the lot. Everything he'd bought was sold, stolen, or repossessed, but he still owed Bank of America $170,000 for his credit card purchases and the state of Florida $50,000 in property taxes. The bank foreclosed on their Florida home, and Edwards and Shauna were forced to relocate to the rented warehouse that had been used to store his fleet of cars. Tiffany and her stepbrother were taken in for foster care. In the beginning, it was good, she said. I had a dad. That's all I'd wanted. In the end, I was devastated because I'd lost my dad, and I knew it. In the midst of accusations of adultery and abuse, Edwards and Shauna finally broke up, and he spiraled into misery and drug addiction. Conditions in the storage unit rapidly deteriorated until he was discovered there, living in his own feces, surrounded by rotting food, crack pipes, and syringes. His next step was rehab, and once clean, his ex-wife and her husband arrived to take him back to Kentucky. There he survived on disability payments and food stamps in a trailer park, a far cry from his previous opulent lifestyle of mansions and fast cars. But more than his wealth, he missed his friends and family who were gone or dead, and Shauna, who had quickly remarried. Despite being off the drugs, his liver was shot, his health started to deteriorate, and in 2012, he was diagnosed with liver disease. Then, in 2013, just 12 years after his historic win, he passed away in hospice, alone, and he was cremated as there was no money to bury him. He left Tiffany with nothing, not even a life insurance policy. She'd later reflect, would he still be alive if he hadn't won? Yes, I think he would. Imagine winning the lottery.
Grandma, you okay, boy? We won the lottery. We won!
The thrill, the excitement, the endless possibilities. For many, it's a dream come true. But for Mavis Wanchik, a Massachusetts hospital worker, winning $758 million in the Powerball lottery became a nightmare.
This is God.
Overnight, Mavis became one of the wealthiest people in the country, catapulted above celebs like Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. But with the newfound wealth came unexpected attention, scrutiny, and danger. Mavis soon discovered that winning the lottery wasn't all it's cracked up to be. The The winning moment. It was August 23, 2017, and Mavis was leaving work with her friend Rob. She bought 5 tickets 4 days earlier, but hadn't watched the draw live, as she never imagined she could win. As she put it, "It's never going to be me. It's just a pipe dream that I've always had." Rob checked the numbers though, and he noted something. "I bet you someone won with these numbers as birthdays." The exact method Mavis had used to pick hers. So she got out her tickets and checked them against the numbers Rob was reading out: 6, 7, 16, 23, and 26. Key dates from her family's birthdays. Plus the Powerball number 4, the number she used at Keno every Friday night. Mavis was in disbelief and handed her ticket to her friend for confirmation. She hadn't just won a few $100. She matched all 6 numbers, the odds of which are just 1 in 292.2 million. She'd won the jackpot, a jaw-dropping $758 million, almost $1 billion. In shock, Mavis didn't know how to react. Fortunately, her friend Rob was a firefighter and could keep his cool in stressful situations. His first instruction was to sign her ticket straight away, which she did. Then she needed to go home. Rob was pretty sure she was good to drive, but just in case, he followed her back to her house. Once she'd been safely escorted, she called her son to share the good news, then rushed over to her sister's house to present the winning ticket. She'd been playing the lottery for more than 20 years, and it had finally paid off. Of course, at this stage, she had no idea how many people played her lucky numbers, and therefore, how many she'd be sharing the prize with. So just how much had she won? Claiming the money. To find out, she had to travel to the Massachusetts State Lottery headquarters and claim her prize. There, lottery officials confirmed her win, and more importantly, that she was the only jackpot winner of the draw. She didn't have to share, and the whole prize was hers, $758.7 million, the largest win on a single ticket in U.S. history at the time. The next step was to make the big decision: take the lump sum or opt for the annual payments and 5% interest. Financially, taking the cash in one go makes much more sense, as investing it will generally provide a much higher return. But yearly payments are a great option for those worried they might be unable to control themselves with their newfound wealth. Fortunately, Mavis was a level-headed woman. She'd grown up comfortable, not rich, not poor, and lived a modest lifestyle. While many would race to spend their millions on mansions, sports cars, and lavish holidays, Mavis simply wanted to pay off the loan on her existing vehicle and retire early. So, she took the cash payment of $758 million and, after taxes, received a whopping $336 million. This gave her a net worth higher than some countries like Micronesia and the Pacific Islands of Palau, not to mention most A-list celebs. Like many of us, her first move was to ring up her boss at the nursing department at Mercy Medical Center, where she'd worked for 32 years, and tell him she would not be coming back. "I had a pipe dream, and my dream has finally come true," she said. "I wanted to retire in 12 years, and it came early." While down-to-earth Mavis would have preferred to relish her early retirement, relax at home, and figure out what to do next, she was quickly swept up in a media storm. Nearly every advisor would tell lottery winners to remain anonymous, or at least delaying coming forward until the media storm had quieted down. But everyone was excited, including the state of Massachusetts, which stood to make $24 million off the win, and Mavis was talked into a press conference within just 24 hours. There, they presented her with an oversized check for her millions. It was a massive event, with news cameras from all over the country capturing the moment. Mavis, supported by her mother and 2 sisters, was met with a frenzy of questions about her numbers the moment she found out and what she planned to do with the money. The cameras were flashing, the reporters were shouting at her, but Mavis took it all in her stride. She was calm, cool, and collected, even though her life had just made a mind-boggling turn for the better. When she was asked how she planned on celebrating that evening, she joked, "I'm gonna go hide in my bed." For many, an early announcement is a red flag indicating an overexcited winner wanting to show off to the world and blow their money on champagne, designer clothes, and fast cars. But for Mavis, it was simply a very naive mistake. "I just wanted to do this. I wanted to just get it over and done with. and then everybody would just leave me alone. Of course, that didn't happen, and she was quickly left fearing for her life. The aftermath. Everyone, including Mavis, knows that a lottery win doesn't always equal a lifetime of wealth. Take William Bud Post, for example. He won $16.2 million in the Pennsylvania lottery in 1988, and within a few years, he was bankrupt and on food stamps. Or David Lee Edwards, who won $27 million in the Powerball lottery in 2001 and quickly squandered it all on lavish homes, fancy cars, and frivolous expenses. Within a few years, he was broke and living in a storage unit. Mavis knew these cautionary tales well and sought out professional advice. Happily, she wasn't the type to blow her fortune, but unfortunately, she couldn't control the media attention and the general public.
I want to have your baby.
I know your mama.
Suddenly thrown into the public eye, with her face plastered on newspapers and television screens across the country, reporters were calling her non-stop for interviews, and everyone wanted a piece of her. Everywhere she went, people were staring at her, asking her for autographs and selfies. She couldn't leave her house without being recognized, and even her friends and family members were calling her non-stop for money. Mavis felt like she was suffocating under the weight of her newfound wealth and fame. Even people that she used to deeply care about turned foul and violent after she won. They saw her as nothing but an ATM. Sadly, it didn't just stop with the people she knew. People from all over the country started hunting for her contact information. One even called Chicopee Police Public Information Officer Michael Wilk, telling him an obviously fake sob story and asking him to request money from Mavis on their behalf. He refused and hung up. But that was just the beginning. In the days after the press conference, strangers started showing up in her neighborhood, trying to track her down. They went door to door, asking people if they knew where Mavis lived, and her long-term home and sanctuary suddenly became a very dangerous place for her to be. The police were forced to increase patrols in her neighborhood and even stationed officers outside her house, hoping the increased visibility would deter those with bad intentions. Fortunately, it worked, and Mavis escaped any physical confrontations. Unfortunately, those looking to cash in on her win took their hunt online. Attempted scams. Scammers began crawling out of the woodwork to try to take advantage of her newfound fame and fortune. Phone calls, emails, and letters began pouring in, all claiming to be from people looking to share in her good fortune. Mavis was inundated with messages from strangers asking for money, promising to invest her winnings for her, and even threatening her and her family if she didn't comply with their demands. It was a dark side of her sudden fame that she could never have anticipated. The scammers were persistent, and they came in all shapes and sizes. Some claimed to be from charitable organizations, while others promised access to exclusive investment opportunities. It was overwhelming, and Mavis found herself constantly on guard, never knowing who to trust. Despite the stress and fear that came with being targeted, Mavis refused to let them win. She reached out to law enforcement officials who worked tirelessly to identify and prosecute those responsible. She found support from her family and close friends who helped her deal with the constant attention and then hired a legal team and other advisors to keep her away from scams. She also made a conscious effort to give back to her community, donated a portion of her winnings to charity, and set up a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in healthcare. Frustratingly, the scammers were smart, and when they realized that Mavis wasn't going to fall for their cons, they decided to turn things around. Identity theft. Online scams are a numbers game. The vast majority of people will never fall for a phishing or financial scam that arrives in their inbox, but a minority will. This means that all scammers have to do is target enough people, and they'll eventually receive a payout. This is why targeting Mavis didn't work. She was just one person who was expecting it, and was now surrounded by financial advisors and law enforcement. So instead, scammers started using her name and press conference videos to attempt to con others. Just days after her win became public knowledge, the emails started landing in people's inboxes. Some were short and to the point, like, "Congratulations, you've been granted a charitable donation of $40 million by Mrs. Mavis Wanchick to be transferred in the next few days. Please contact her for more information at maviswanchick23@gmail.com. Thanks." Others were more sophisticated. detailing her past and wish for a modest life, claiming, "I've decided to do God's work after having a long conversation with some ministers of God and prayer sessions. I want you and your family to be happy as we are happy today. We have voluntarily decided to donate the sum of $5 million for you and your family as part of our own charity project to help increase the fortune of 14 lucky people around the world." One even tried to cash in on the tragic death of Mavis's ex-husband by saying she had set up a donation program in his name, and the recipient of the email could enter a raffle for their chance of winning €4.2 million. Of course, to enter, the email recipient had to reply with their full name, email address, phone number, and information about their occupation. These phishing scams managed to harvest a wealth of private information that could later be used for fraud. And they didn't just stick to email. Hundreds of fake Facebook and Instagram accounts were set up in Mavis's name. Many came with a bio like "lottery winner of $758 million, giving back $5,000 to the first 100,000 followers. This is too much money for me, and I love helping people." This particular account ended up with 54.7 thousand followers. While following a fake Instagram isn't going to cause anyone to lose their savings, tragically, some were taken in by the scams. One victim was contacted by a Mavis account offering $15,000. All he had to do to claim the money was pay some fees, amounting to $3,786 in untraceable bit currency. Unfortunately, he fell for it and transferred the money. When the $15,000 didn't arrive, he paid another $300 to expedite the check. Then the scammers turned nasty and demanded access to his Facebook account and $500, or they'd turn the victim in to the FBI. The fake accounts became such a problem that the Chicopee police were forced to release a statement warning residents not to follow or respond to any messages supposedly from Mavis. Then Mavis herself went public with the story, warning others about the dangers of falling prey to the lottery scammers and encouraging people to report any suspicious activity. She made it clear that she would not be reaching out to anybody randomly and offering free money. Life after the lottery. It was a long and difficult journey, but in the end, Mavis learned how to exist in the public eye and found a balance between her newfound fame and her desire for privacy. She was forced to leave her home, but soon settled in a larger property with a pool roughly in the same area. Today, she's living the life she always dreamed of, surrounded by the people she loves and doing her best to have a positive impact on the world. She hopes her story will serve as a cautionary tale for others in a similar situation. Wealth can be a double-edged sword. It can bring blessings, but it can also be a curse. The key is to approach it with humility, seek professional advice, and, most importantly, remain anonymous. Number 15. Rachel Kennedy and Liam McCrohan. Rachel Kennedy and Liam McCrohan are a young British couple who won a gigantic lottery jackpot in 2021. Almost. Every week, Rachel played exactly the same numbers on her Euro Millions lottery tickets. She was so dedicated, she'd set up her online lottery account to automatically buy a ticket with those numbers. Then, one week, Rachel and Liam checked the lottery draw and couldn't believe their eyes. The winning numbers for the €228 million jackpot matched Rachel's numbers. They immediately started planning how they were going to spend such a gigantic amount of cash. The young couple realized their lives had changed forever. But when Rachel checked her online ticket, she spotted something weird. It wasn't there. She contacted the National Lottery website to find out what happened and got the worst possible news. There had been an error when the automatic ticket purchase was taking place, and the payment never went through. In other words, she didn't have a ticket. They missed out on that mind-blowing sum of money, and there was absolutely nothing they can do about it. It might be the biggest lottery tragedy of all time, but at least their lives didn't change. The next winner lost more than he won. Number 14. Daniel Carley. Canadian Daniel Carley won the Ontario Lottery at the most perfect moment ever. He was just about to marry the woman of his dreams, who also happened to be pregnant with their first child. He had a pretty perfect life already, but when he won an incredible $5 million Canadian dollars, or about $4.4 million US dollars, he was given the kind of financial stability that most new parents can only dream of. And his life would have been perfect if he'd used his money that way. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Instead, he and his friends gathered at his dad's bar for a celebration party. That would have been just fine, but when the party ended, Daniel didn't want to stop. So he didn't. Over the next 10 years, he partied all his money away. It won't surprise you that his young wife left to look after his child in a more stable environment. His friends didn't want to know this out-of-control version of Daniel, so they disappeared from his life too. It wasn't long before he ran out of money, and when that happened, he turned to drugs again. But this time, he was selling them. He was eventually arrested and sent to prison for his crimes. Daniel chose a path that led him to losing his perfect life. But sometimes, lottery winners do everything right, and their story still ends in tragedy. That's what happened to the next winner on our list. Number 13. Francisco Guerrero. Francisco Guerrero had been a hard worker his whole life. He'd worked as a bricklayer in Spain, slowly earning himself enough money to support his family, and even buying more than one house. That's pretty impressive. After all that hard work, it almost feels like he'd earned his lottery win. He hit a jackpot worth about $8.6 million. But he wasn't the partying type, and he didn't know what to do with all that cash. So he figured the most responsible thing to do was to take it to the bank. That's the advice lottery winners are always given, so it sounds like a pretty good decision. The experts at the bank told him to invest 40% of his winnings and put the rest into a savings account for his children. That sounded like a good idea to him, and he left his money in their hands. He continued going to work and lived his life the way he did before winning the lottery. After all, he was pretty happy that way. But then something went wrong. He suffered a serious injury to his knee that meant he needed expensive surgery. Luckily, he had millions in that savings account thanks to his lottery winnings. He went down to the bank to withdraw some of his cash, but he was shocked to discover the account was totally empty. What he learned next would horrify anyone. The bank had put 40% of his winnings into a terrible investment. They told him there were no risks, but they were totally wrong. Not only had they lost his investment, but they'd got him into serious debt. To pay it off, they used all the cash in the savings account meant for his kids, and they'd even lost all the properties he'd earned through hard work. That's the perfect example of how many things can go wrong when you hit the lottery. It's pretty sad when someone loses everything because of someone else's mistake, but this next winner definitely caused their own downfall. Number 12. Evelyn Basor. You could say Evelyn Basor was one of the luckiest people who ever lived. That's because she won the lottery not once, but twice. And her two wins happened within just 4 months of each other. The first win in 1985 was worth a whopping $3.9 million. And the second, the next year, was another $1.4 million. That's a lot of cash now, but it was worth even more then. She could have done nearly anything with it. So what did she choose to do? Well, she took it to the casino. I guess she figured her luck worked for her in the past, and she'd make even more money. But she was wrong. Her winning streak was over, and the last time anyone heard of her, she was living in a trailer park and working 2 jobs to pay for food. That's a pretty irresponsible way to spend your lottery winnings. But she's not the only winner who blew all her cash. Here's another one. Number 11. Michael Carroll. At the tender age of just 19, British teen Michael Carroll won the lottery. He collected the $14 million with a police ankle bracelet still around his leg. That probably gives you a good idea of what happened next. He spent wildly buying a mansion he didn't like and spending even more on fixing it up. He built a demolition derby racetrack in the back garden where he'd destroy luxury cars. He was starting the day with cocaine and vodka for breakfast, and he spent millions on sex parties in the mansion, even though he had a wife and child. Soon, his family and friends had left him because he was behaving so badly. Lucky for him, when he went broke, his wife decided to take pity on him, and she came back. That's a surprisingly happy ending, considering he said he'd be dead by now if he still had the money. But not everyone gets their life back after. Just ask. Number 10. Andrew Jack Whitaker. Andrew Whitaker was living a pretty comfortable life before he won the lottery. He already had $17 million that he'd earned himself. There's no doubt that's impressive. But his fortune skyrocketed when he got lucky and won the lottery too. His win was a gigantic $315 million. You'd think that because he was pretty rich already, he would have known how to keep that money. But fate had other plans. Criminals got the better of him, totally emptying his bank account with several robberies. Within just 4 years, he was totally broke. He'd even lost the millions of dollars he'd had before winning the lottery. He's not the only winner who was taken advantage of. This next winner was also treated pretty badly. Number 9. Callie Rogers. Back in 2003, Callie Rogers was living in foster care and working at a supermarket. Then, she suddenly made headlines when she became the world's youngest ever lottery winner. She was only 16 at the time, but she now had an incredible $2.3 million in the bank. The British teen totally changed her life with that money, but sadly, not in a good way. She started spending it on crazy stuff, with no role models to help her make good decisions. She also developed a drug habit, and her strange lifestyle made her depressed. That led her to spend tons of cash on plastic surgery, hoping to feel a little better about herself. But it didn't help. She said the money made her feel like nobody cared about her because she would buy drinks for people in bars who were only talking to her so they can get a story they could sell to tabloids. She lost every cent she won and now campaigns to try to change the minimum age for lottery players. Luckily, Callie says she's much happier now she doesn't have the money anymore. She's also a proud mom of 3. But what about this next teenage lottery winner? Number 8. Jane Park. Jane Park was earning just $9 an hour at an office job in 2013. It was her birthday, and she decided to treat herself to her first ever lottery ticket. Incredibly, that ticket hit the jackpot. She won the equivalent of $1.3 million thanks to the Euro Millions lottery, and she was only 17 years old. Unfortunately, instead of using it to start her adult life so she could follow her dreams, she just spent it. Her first purchase was a Louis Vuitton handbag, and that was pretty much how she continued. She bought luxury cars, holidays, and even plastic surgery. It didn't take long before her crazy lifestyle stopped being fun. She said she began to feel depressed and very lonely. Luckily, she could move back in with her mom and try to get her life back on track. Her mom had been pretty clever and had made sure she put some of Jane's winnings into a savings account. So Jane still had some of her millions. And like Callie, she also campaigns to get the minimum legal age for playing the lottery changed. She says she was just too young to handle it. Jane and Callie might be right. Maybe teenagers don't have the maturity to manage that much cash. But our next winner proves that adults can be pretty irresponsible too. Number 7. Keith Goh. Keith Goh was 58 when he won the lottery. He was a happily married baker when he hit the UK National Lottery jackpot. He went home with winnings equal to $12 million. He could have retired with that money, but instead, he decided to spend it. All he wanted to do was drive fast cars, bet tons of cash on horse racing, spend time in his private executive box at Aston Villa Football Club, and drink loads of alcohol. That's when the real problem started. Tragically, his alcohol addiction finally got so bad that his wife was forced to leave him. That wasn't an easy decision. They loved each other, and splitting up really hurt them both. Before Keith won the lottery, they had been looking forward to retiring and living a peaceful life together. Sadly, soon after his wife left, Keith passed away due to a heart attack. Most people are pretty sure he died of a broken heart. Keith isn't the only lottery winner to die as a result of what he chose to do with his money. But this next story is much weirder. Number 6. Justin Ryder. Justin Ryder's lottery win wasn't as big as most people on this list. He only got $600,000, but he wasn't worried. To him, that was just his chance to afford his ultimate dream. Don't even try to guess what it was. It's too crazy. Justin had watched the classic Austin Powers film Goldmember, and it had given him an idea. He wanted a gold member of his own. So he went out and spent his lottery winnings on some gold paint. And when he got home, he happily dipped his nether regions into it. Then he just went on with his life as normal, glad that he achieved his dream. But it wasn't long before he realized something didn't feel right. So he went back to the store and bought another tin of paint. This time, he chose the more expensive option, which was colored with real gold. But weirdly, he chose not to wash off the first coat before redipping. That was his big mistake. The first pot of paint he'd bought was lead-based paint, and the toxic ingredient was slowly absorbing into his bloodstream. Sadly, he was found dead soon after. The cause of death was lead poisoning. He's not the only lottery winner who didn't do enough research before spending his winnings. Here's another one that made a big mistake by not reading the fine print. Number 5. John McGinnis. Back in 1997, John McGinnis was working as a hospital porter when he hit the UK National Lottery jackpot. His winnings were equal to about $16.4 million, which was a ton of cash back in the 90s. He was pretty generous with his winnings, but he also used some to buy luxuries for himself. But he wasn't spending too wildly, definitely not enough to go broke. He decided to spend some of his fortune on his biggest passion, football. So he bought a whole team. It cost him $4.9 million. That's a lot of cash, but he still had loads left, except for one mistake. He had no idea that by buying the team, he was accepting personal responsibility for their debts. Within 12 years, the team's debts had eaten through every cent John had won, plus his own personal savings he'd earned before winning the lottery. He tried to follow his passion, but ended up broke instead. There's no shortage of lottery winners like John, who accidentally picked up a really bad deal. Here's another British winner who made a bad British choice. Number 4. John Roberts. John Roberts was so poor before winning the lottery that he was living in government housing in Scotland because he couldn't afford to pay rent. We can only imagine what it must have felt like to suddenly win over $5 million. Unfortunately, he didn't really know what to do with all that cash, so he started buying any luxury item he could dream of. But that wasn't his biggest mistake. One day, 2 of his friends came to him with a business deal. They easily convinced him to invest. John loved the idea of going into business with friends, except they weren't really his friends. Sadly, they'd lied about the investment, and they took off with the last of John's money. Just 3 years after his big win, he was broke and living in a mobile home. It's definitely true, you gotta be careful when choosing your friends. Here's another lottery winner who found that out the hard way. Number 3. Marie Holmes. Marie Holmes was a single mom who was working 3 jobs to put food on the table. Then, in 2015, she got lucky when her North Carolina Powerball ticket won her a whopping $188 million. That was her share of a larger $564 million jackpot that was split between 3 winners. Her problem started straight away when her family accused her of stealing the ticket. They'd said Marie's mom was actually the one who chose the numbers. It turned out they were right. Marie thought it was a quick pick ticket, but her mom had carefully chosen the numbers for her. But luckily for Marie, her mom said she wanted her to have the ticket. After that, Marie's life only got worse. She tried to do something good by giving money to her church, but the priest sued her for not giving them as much as she'd said at the start. Then she started spending way too much cash, and she kept having to bail her heroin trafficker boyfriend out of prison. Brace yourself. The cash she spent on his bail added up to a mind-blowing $21 million. Crazy, right? It didn't work. He still got a prison sentence in the end. You'd think he would at least be grateful, but he later sued her from prison when she sold some of the expensive gifts she bought him. She's basically broke these days. Marie was betrayed by a lot of people. She clearly didn't deserve to be sued for generously giving people money, but this next winner did the opposite and caused her own problems. Number 2. Tanya Lynn Dickerson. This story started in Waffle House. The group of waitresses who worked there had become pretty close over the years, and they decided they would buy some lottery tickets together. The idea was that each one would buy a ticket, and if any of the tickets won, they'd split the winnings between them. It was a nice thought, even if none of them expected to win. But they were wrong. One of the waitresses checked her ticket the next day and realized it was worth $10 million. There was just one problem. Tanda was the holder of the winning ticket, and she decided she didn't want to share. Obviously, the other waitresses were pretty unhappy about that. Not only had they lost out on their money, but they had also been betrayed by someone they thought was their friend. So they got together and sued Tanda. Unfortunately, they lost the case, and Tanda got away with all the cash. By then, the boss from Waffle House had heard what she'd done. He couldn't believe she treated her friends like that and got away with it. So he tried to get some justice for the waitresses. He sued Tanda, saying the waitress had promised to buy him a new truck if they'd won. The case went all the way to Supreme Court, but Tanda eventually won again. She'd nearly got away with it, but then she slipped up. Tonda decided to protect her money by opening a corporation. That would have been safe, except that she gifted shares of the corporation to her family. That was a big mistake because she didn't realize those shares qualified for gift tax. The IRS came after her when they realized the tax hadn't been paid, and she was forced to hand over $1 million. So none of her friends got the share of the money, but at least she had to pay something. She's not even the only lottery winner who was meant to share the cash but tried to take it all for herself. The last winner on our list got what was coming to her though. Number 1. Denise Rossi. Denise Rossi got super lucky one day when she hit the lottery jackpot. She won $1.3 million. That's pretty amazing news. So you'd think the first thing she would have done is tell her husband. After all, they've been married for 25 years. But she had other plans. She kept her win a secret, and instead of celebrating with her husband, Thomas, she asked for a divorce. She said later she didn't want him to get any of the money. She just wanted it all for herself and was happy to break up their marriage to get her way. But it didn't work. During her divorce proceedings, someone found out what she'd done, and that information really counted against her. According to the law, not disclosing the lottery win counted as fraud. In the end, she was ordered to pay all of her winnings to her now ex-husband. All these winners missed out on changing their lives one way or another, but it doesn't have to be that way. Take a look at our list of the smartest lottery winners in the world to see how to handle your lottery winnings the right way.